Cadbury Gorilla ad. At the time of its release, it was a sensation. As the award-winning a.p.e. paper later pointed out, it helped to reduce price sensitivity and drive profit, and regain the public's trust in the brand following a food safety scare the year before. And yet, it was an ad that traditional pretesting failed to endorse. It was an ad that almost didn't make it to air at all. In those days, pretesting, which was closer in philosophy to salesmanship advertising, was beginning to make it very difficult for showmanship advertising such as this to get made. Talk to anyone who's worked in the industry, and they will tell you about a campaign that has failed in testing and gone on to succeed in real life. They will also, no doubt, be able to tell you about the many other promising campaigns that have never seen the light of day because they were lost to testing.
At the time, there was a long-running pushback against pretesting. Actually, it was as much about qualitative as quantitative. In fact, in Marketing Year of Accountability, we argued against both of them at the time because they both didn't particularly correlate very strongly with effectiveness. But we now know, particularly in the case of quantitative pretesting, we now know why that was the case. And we started to stumble upon the reason why in that book when we noted that the kind of advertising that was favoured by the pretesting techniques of the time tended to do very well in the short term, but did very badly in the long term.
It tended to favour salesmanship over showmanship.
Exactly. It favoured the kinds of messages, the kinds of advertising that, work at the bottom of the funnel and drive people to buy now, assuming they're going to, they have some time for your brand, as opposed to the kind of more showmanship type advertising, emotional advertising that builds those preferences over a longer period of time, but ultimately gets you to a much stronger place.
We at System1 believed that there was perhaps another way to look at this. Emotion was at the time felt to be peripheral to the measurement of advertising's potential, but we believed it should be front and centre. Indeed, the very first thing to be assessed in the appraisal of any ad. And so we had been developing an approach that we felt could help promote showmanship advertising, a holistic assessment, one that understood the primary importance of emotion. We created a pictorial self-report measure showing a person's face in different states of emotion, the 7 basic emotions that Paul Ekman described, plus neutrality. Because we felt it was perfectly possible that audiences might feel no emotion at all in response to an ad. Familiar with Peter and Les's marketing in the era of accountability, I got in touch with Peter and explained that what we had developed was an approach that put emotion at the heart of advertising assessment. And so Peter and I set up an experiment in 2009 that would pull apart great campaigns from good on the a.p.e.'s effectiveness database. We both wanted to see whether an actual measure of emotion, not simply the author's assessment of the campaign's approach, could help us to understand the showmanship or fame potential of advertising and its greater business effects. And that showed that emotional campaigns were more likely to drive broad and lasting effects, drive awareness, drive growth rate, you could call it. And the message, the reason why advertising wasn't working that way. It didn't drive these broad and lasting effects, but it did drive these short-term direct effects because it's working on the people who are in the market now, in the buying window, And that's really, I think, supported through measures, through research measures, what you had already found to be the case and what you would go on to talk about later in the long and the short.
And that's why I think it was a lovely piece of research, because it was an actual experimental test of some theory, as you said, with proper metrics and a proper kind of controlled kind of environment. The cynics, of course, will say, well, we were looking for a particular result, but it was done blind. You had no idea, what the effectiveness data was saying about individual campaigns. I had no idea what your metrics would be like. When we put the two together, we just found a really, really consistent, clear picture between emotional power and long-term impacts in the marketplace.
Thank heaven for little girls shoes. 4 little girls get bigger every day.
Lemonade is 50 cents. I take Hong Kong dollars. That's it, Auntie.
It was for the CMO of a global bank that we first developed System1's star rating. He thought it would be very useful for the business if he had a 1-number score that could be linked to likely business effects. So back at System1, I sit down with John Kieran, System1's founder, and we think of a way of dramatising what we had until that time simply called our emotion into action score. The result was a star rating that would range, rather like the film or show reviews you've seen on posters, from 1 to 5, a rating for showmanship advertising rooted in emotion. I remember describing this new star rating to the marketing team at the bank and their advertising agency. The head of planning at the agency turned to the marketing team and said, "This is all fine, but I hope you realise that this means a totally different style of advertising." And he was quite right. The bank and the agency went on to make a 5-star ad that aired around the world. It was highly successful to the extent that the CEO urged the marketing team to please make another.
At HSBC, we believe that in the future, even the smallest business will be multinational.
We know the model of pretesting has changed from the early one, which was about rational impacts. The current one is very much more about emotional. Yeah. So one can expect on purely theoretical basis that it will have improved its act. So prompted really by an article written by Mark Ritson not so long ago, I actually went back into the database and updated those findings from almost 20 years ago, where we had then shown that quantitative pretesting negatively correlated with effectiveness. Mm. If you look at the latest data, you find the reverse is true, that actually the correlation is now positive and respectably strong. Some of the metrics are definitely statistically significant at the 90% level. The real problem is we have an ocean, a long, long tail of advertising, which is risible. It's terrible. And pretesting is the one tool that could pick that up and stop it ever being born, frankly. That's what we really need. That's why we need to pretest, is to get rid of all of that stuff so we can focus on doing the good stuff. So let's stop criticising what could be a great tool for the improvement of advertising.
I think the danger comes, doesn't it, when you've got a pretesting model that's suited really to salesmanship and you try and apply it to showmanship, because that destroys...
It's not going to be a happy...
It destroys your showmanship advertising, undermines it, changes it in some way for the worse, you know.
Yeah.
So that's the big watch out for me. But look, if we've had anything to do with the change, that would be wonderful, wouldn't it?
I'm sure we have.
Thing. I think we have.
We gave the market a way forward, and the market has moved forward with it. And I think it's been, a very rewarding time.
It has.